Summer 2020 sure has been tough. Businesses closing, residents moving away. Today in Bushwick, I'm visiting an artist who has to move out of his studio after 12 years. I know we've all had a hard time this year, but that must suck. If Brooklyn tells you gotta go, then you gotta go. But where do you go? And what do you do when you get there?
Hi, Joey. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing all right.
When I worked here, there was a desk, a bookshelf kind of thing with the flat files. And then this side was always been open for like open studios and like visits and things like that.
It's very ornate, but it's very gentle, especially the colors are very gentle. It's interesting to me, the connection that you're making from like these very kind of, I guess, pastoral landscapes to like the modern world and the internet and how we think and how we're processing information and how it's affecting our lives. I wouldn't think that really to look at these directly, but when you say that, it becomes very apparent to me.
I think this one in particular, like that waterfall piece, that was a closer representation to, once you do a Google search of waterfall, you know, it's just like a waterfall of waterfalls. And then it was also the way you digest information and this endless flow. I like that mixture of referencing art historical pieces and also silly postcards from 60s landscape magazines or personal images and smashing them all together.
Okay.
Which is another way, you know, just how we digest things.
You mentioned when we were walking up that, you know, that you're getting ready to move out of this space, and I understand you've been here 10 years?
This is the 12th year.
Can you talk a little bit about New York and how being here, like, particularly, like, affected your process and the work that you ended up making, especially being in this neighborhood?
Oh, yeah. I think probably one of the most substantial influences this particular neighborhood has been like Bushwick Open Studios, which won't happen this year, but I think it started in 2006 or 2008. That was like really, really exciting and energizing to be like, holy crap. This is so interesting where you see a range of really professional, high-end work and people that were like myself, just not, you know, figuring it out on the fly, but opening their door and having these conversations.
I would love to, if it's possible, to go and see your live workspace now, where you work now, where you work out of. Can we do that?
Yeah. I'll clock out real quick, and that'll be
What
good.
was it? You're gonna clock out?
Having spent a considerable amount of time as a freelancer, for any job I've ever had to do, I had to basically log my hours and share those in order to get paid. It was something where I was like, wow, I do that for my job. Why don't I do that for my practice, just as a way to bring some discipline, just like kind of write down that mindset of like, oh, I'm working now. I don't want the value of the work to be exclusively connected to time, but it is obviously in the work itself it's like all these tiny marks that are built up slowly. And during studio visits, it's definitely one of the first things that people ask. They're like, oh wow, how long did that take? And it's really nice to be like, oh yeah, 22 by 30 piece generally takes about 80 hours of desk hours.
Mind if we take our masks off just for the walk? to your house. We'll stay a little bit socially distanced.
All right.
This is one of your last times leaving your studio space.
Yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a drawn out process where going up, like when I sent the email to Michael about leaving the space, who has the lease on the building, it was a quick, firm decision, but it hurt, you know?
Oh.
And then like, just mostly because it was like my first studio space, and
Oh man.
when I moved in, it wasn't quite to make the work that I make now, so I feel in some ways like I grew up in the space a little bit. Basically, an opportunity presented itself where we'd be able to go to Colorado, where my wife's parents live, and stay there for 5 months while they winter somewhere else. And and part of me is thinking like how that might, one, working in a new environment that's so radically different, kind of doesn't quite have the community and the connection with where my work was going anyway. So all of that is much more, I don't know, it's interesting and exciting, and like I have more curiosity about it than I have fear or trepidation or anything like that. It's definitely, yeah, a lot more questions that need to be answered, I guess.
How do you feel like the COVID pandemic affected your art? And I'm like specifically interested in if it affected your drawing in itself.
I definitely hadn't ever quite, it definitely felt more like a therapy tool than just a practice, where I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on like how you felt, especially early April when we're still climbing the mountain. But for me, it was like, there's nothing else to do. I just feel the collective stress, and having something to focus on was, made me feel a lot better.
The COVID response for me was I wasn't very stressed. I was like, things were okay. Like we were able to make our rent and pay our bills, and I didn't know anyone who was sick or passed away. And I knew that wasn't the case for a lot of people. So I like really, it was really important to me to not, I just felt like, man, I feel good and I feel happy making work. And like, how dare I not make work right now? When other people do not, they're either essential workers, or they're getting sick, or they can't pay their rent. None of those things are happening for me. I'd better at least make something I'm proud of in this time. I'd better get up every day and try to make something, you know, and enjoy it, you know?
I think for me, there was definitely a navigation of what are these potential risks, knowing the context of my risk compared to someone else's that's a frontline worker, grocery store, anybody. Like, you could walk outside and there were the trailer morgues at the hospital, and so the reality was palpable, but then also just like my present moment felt pretty okay. And navigating between those two things.
Like survivor's guilt you're having. Yeah, I had somebody get really mad at me about it, and then a couple of people, I'm sure people were having that feeling. And then a buddy of mine was like, he was asking like, you know, I don't know how I feel about promoting music or releasing music at this time. And I just remember thinking like, aren't we always saying that we're making music to get people through hard times, that we're making art to get people through hard times? If this is anything, isn't it a hard time?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we be releasing art now?
Yeah.
I know that maybe it feels inappropriate, it doesn't feel right, but like the guilt to me seems strange. Like, and especially if you're making music, like if you're not making music to get people through hard times, you know, what is the music? Is the music for brunch?
Yeah.
What is the music for?
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like this is the time that people need that stuff. They feel alone and they need to feel good and feel hopeful. You know?
Yeah.
This is it?
Yeah, this is the place. Yeah, second floor and all that good stuff.
All right.
Yeah, here is the space. There's my cat Velcro.
Hi, Velcro.
Yeah. I think working digitally for some people is an end in itself, and I think it's great, and there's a lot of great digital art. For me, the connection to the labor of building up the line is something that I value. And even if I work from the same photo several times, each piece is really different.
You've used the word discipline several times, labor several times.
Yeah, I think my connection to the timesheets and an idea of, I don't know, that my dad got up at 3 a.m. every day to go to work. And I don't know, there's like, I have this sort of internalized idea of work, so it's, one way it's crazy, but another way I'm like, I don't know, I guess this is what I have to do. This is just, I didn't plan on making work like this, but all right, this is happening. And even when I'm really tired at the end of the day and I sit down to work, it's giving. Like, I'm more energized, and I'm like, oh, I did my work for the day. This is good.
There's so much to admire about Joey Parlett. His gentle and enthusiastic spirit, the breathtaking meticulousness of his work, his devoted work ethic. I don't tend to buy into the idea of an artist being disciplined, but if there is an argument for it, Joey's beautiful drawings are it. In some ways, I'm happy for Joey, even though he's losing his home of 12 years. Maybe the grim streets of Brooklyn were just a tour of duty for him, a camp he was stationed at to work his way up the ranks, prove his discipline and devotion through many recorded hours of hard work, until he could will his vision of peace and serenity into life. Best of luck on your next assignment, bud.